Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Kelly here with Esri and I'd like to thank you for joining us on our webinar today. So today we're going to be discussing building a system of engagement for obstacles and terrain. And with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to our first presenter today, Jonathan Weaver.
Thank you, Kelly, and thank you everyone for joining. My name is Jonathan Weaver and I lead our global business development or global aviation business development at Esri. I'm joined by Matt Woodleaf, who is a solution engineer on our national government team, and we also have a few other folks from Esri in the background that's going to be helping out with the Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. So in one of our previous webinars, we focused on obstacle workflows, and for the most part, it was really focused around the desktop side. We've got a lot of good tools to support those workflows on the desktop side, but now what we really want to do is take a closer look at how we can better engage our stakeholders through some configured applications and really seeing what's possible, even using some of the JavaScript APIs to build out some of the widgets and embed those in some of the web app builders that we have. So this is a common workflow that we see among national aviation authorities. They need to collect obstacle information coming in from multiple sources. That might include survey data, submissions from external parties in the form of PDFs or Word documents, things like that. And then once we collect that information, we typically want to do some kind of analysis with it. So penetration analysis for the obstacles or even terrain. And then after we do the analysis for the airports, the CNS surfaces, we then kind of move into that produce part of it. So creating information products to support some of the obstacle reports. Those are the outcomes of the analysis, for example, doing some of the obstacle charting, and then possibly even some of the mobile apps and maps for site verification of those obstacles. And then with that information, we typically want to share that through using ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. And it's through those configured web applications that starts to open up a lot of possibilities and starts to create the system of engagement that we're going to be talking a lot about today. And then you've got the managed piece down at the bottom. And this is especially important for our European community with requirements around ADQ or aeronautical data quality. So being able to kind of track and trace the different pieces and interactions with the data throughout the data chain and its life cycle. So again, what's really compelling here is on that ArcGIS Enterprise or ArcGIS Online side. So that's what's going to help us to create some engagement with our community and our stakeholders, and from the collection side all the way out through the produce side, and obviously even into the managed side with some of the dashboards that we have. So we support that workflow through these three systems. We call it system of record, system of insight, and system of engagement. So first on the system of record, that is our system of record keeping. This is all of the transactional data management, for example. And then we can move into that system of insight. This is where the analysis happens, kind of creates understanding of our system of record and the inputs of all of the different information that we're getting. And then that final piece is that system of engagement. So these are the apps and maps that start to connect our users to all of that information, both to the system of record as well as to that system of insight. So this is the system that we're most interested in today. So how can we create that system of engagement through apps that are easily configured and deployed? Perhaps even taking it a step further through customization using the JavaScript API, and we'll see an example of that today as well. Now, the system of engagement doesn't necessarily have to be by itself. In fact, oftentimes it is coupled with the system of insight or system of record. It helps support on the data collection side, for example. And again, we'll see that in one of the demonstrations. As a review, from one of the previous webinars, if you were not a part of that, and really even as a foundation to work from, for today, we have a lot of tools to integrate into various obstacle and terrain workflows from the data management side. So that's really the database model, the information model that supports ETOD, for example, the electronic terrain and obstacle data. And from there, we've got kind of the data creation side. So automating the surface creation for obstacle imitation surfaces according to the different criteria or standards such as ICAO and FAA. And then we move into the analysis piece. So on the analysis side, that involves the penetration analysis with obstacles as well as terrain. Here's an example of just being able to identify the terrain that's penetrating the approach surface. And then even more recently, creating what we call intersection of the obstacle limitation surfaces. So if you could imagine having multiple obstacle surfaces on top of each other, and then conducting a 3D intersection of all of those obstacle surfaces, you actually get the output are the most restrictive surfaces for each of those intersecting components. So what that does is really allows our users to create what are called these height restriction maps, which are typically 2D map or 2D representation of these 3D surfaces. That is more of a planning tool for those that are looking to, build new buildings, do construction, so they can see exactly how high they can build within each of those individual zones. And then the last piece is obstacle distance calculation. So this is largely supporting the FAA community with 18B. So being able to do the different calculations for obstacles against the runway. So what is the distance from the distance of the obstacle to the center line, or the center line extended to the threshold, for example. So we do a bunch of different calculations. We've done some improvements to this to these calculations as well that you'll be able to see in the next version of the airports extension that's going to be released later in the year. The first step to building out some of these system of engagement apps is really the publication of the content that's going to be, going to be used as part of those apps. So creating the web services that can be consumed really across ArcGIS. So ArcGIS Pro is our desktop GIS, and that really allows us to create that 2D and 3D content all in kind of this integrated environment, and then publish that out as web map services or feature services. And then as you get into some of the 3D content, we typically call those web scenes. And like I said, it's all kind of combined within this single experience within ArcGIS Pro, so you can actually publish 2D content in one interface, and then switching over to 3D all out of the same application. It is simple and intuitive to use. So, and when I say simple, it really is, you author your map, author your web scene, and then using some of the tools that are available within ArcGIS Pro, you can start to share that out as a web map or web services, specific groups within the organization, or even externally to have broader engagement. So that's going to really allow you to reach your audience. The key point here is you're going to have to be connected to ArcGIS Online or ArcGIS Enterprise. So ArcGIS Online is our SaaS offering, GIS offering. ArcGIS Enterprise is kind of an on-premise where you have the server, the server boxes that you're going to be deploying on. They behave very similar in terms of how you publish that content out. But once you do publish that content out, you're really able to start to target those apps and reach your audience with those system of engagement apps. And here's some examples of those. So again, for me, I can reach my audience through this integrated system of sharing the content and engaging customers. In these examples, these are all different apps to support that system of engagement, and we can produce these apps, largely doing that through just configuring and deploying those applications. So without much code, or without any code in some cases. You can create dashboards, for example, to show metrics and KPIs linked to a map. There's data collection forms like Survey 123 and field maps to start to kind of hydrate some of your data models and information models, and then configure those to be collected, to collect the information that you need along with any of the locational information that's tied to it. So the location of a tower, for example. And then you have app builders as well, such as Web App Builder or Experience Builder. Now these create different experiences that allow us to engage with our community and stakeholders, and we can do this in that no-code or low-code experience, but also doing it all the way to a fully customized experience using some of the SDKs and APIs. So in one of the examples that we're going to show, in fact, it's the very next slide here. So one of the examples we're going to show is we're going to kind of tie that one of the widgets that we embed within this experience builder is built from using the JavaScript API. So first, a little bit about the scenario that we'll walk through. Here we want to be able to allow external users to come in, really conduct some self-evaluations of their obstacles, of the structure that they might want to build, really understand whether or not their structure can get approved based on having the immediate feedback and assessing that level of risk based on the different obstacle surfaces that are around. It's an interactive tool that users can kind of click or enter coordinates, determine if the obstacle violates any of those safeguarding surfaces. And I would say this is interesting just because over the last several webinars, we've had questions come in about having some of these capabilities. And so as we thought about this particular webinar, kind of pulling this together, we were able to look at some of the developer samples and with very little modification to some of the developer samples, actually embed that as a widget into this experience builder application. So we've got a published 3D web scene. We're using a 3D web scene over Grenada. Grenada is putting a lot of effort into building out a digital twin of the country. And it really started with high resolution imagery collected for the entire island. And then using some Geo AI capabilities, they were able to automate some of the building extraction to create that rich 3D scene across the island. And like I said, we took a developer sample and expanded that to really create a widget to identify a location for penetration of obstacles in different scenarios. And then embed that one widget inside of Experience Builder so we can have access to it and start to create more of an experience for the user. So that's one demonstration we'll show. That's going to lead directly into this next demonstration, which is going to be focused largely on the obstacle submission process, where a submission can be tracked using something like an ArcGIS dashboard. We do an obstacle submission through a Survey 123 form. That's embedded within this dashboard, so we can actually have reporting metrics as well. And what I'll do is, as we go through that demonstration at the end of it, I'll show you exactly how we can put that obstacle form together to collect that information. So if you think back to that workflow slide of collect, analyze, and produce, this is focused more on that collection side. And then I'm going to pass it over to Matt, who's going to take us through, I think, an interesting scenario around kind of construction projects at an airport. Let's say there's a new hangar that's being constructed. What does that hangar do in terms of impact with the control tower and line of sight capabilities to all of the surface movement areas? So the runways, the taxiways, making sure that the control tower can have visibility to the aircraft at all points on within those surface movement areas. But before we get to that, let's actually start off with the Experience Builder app. Pull that up. So this is our building height restriction planning application. This is, as I mentioned, Experience Builder, embedding one of the widgets that we were able to pull from a developer sample and kind of expanding that. Again, in the background, we've got rich 3D content, all of the buildings collected using automated feature extraction to collect the building heights, the roofs. You've got some pretty decent detail kind of across the island with this. And then also the obstacle surfaces, of course. Because it is an Experience Builder application, it's responsive, it's quick, it shows very nicely across that 3D experience. So in this particular scenario, let's kind of zoom in to a particular location here. I'm going to pull up this obstacle evaluator. So this obstacle evaluator, just move it over here. With this, I can really interact with the 3D scene here. So for example, if I just kind of come here, there's kind of two experiences. One, just interactively clicking. So for example, if I just click maybe right there, it's going to show me the coordinates where I clicked and really the height of the OIS at that particular location. The OIS surface is the conical surface. So what it really means for me at this location is I can build up to a height up to essentially 94 meters. It's still in 3D, so I can kind of zoom in and then kind of see, underneath the surface, it's going right up to the surface. So again, interactive, I can just kind of click around and see the different heights of where I can build. So this is that interactive experience. The other experience that we have is actually using the coordinate inputs. Oops, sorry about that. Come back here. Using the coordinate input. So for example, I can take some coordinates here. I'll just drop them in, copy paste. And let's say, the proposed structure I want to build is at 65 meters, and I can go ahead and submit that. It's going to take me to that location. As I enter that, it is kind of highlighting the fact that, the proposed height that I have is actually penetrating. And all this is happening in real time. I can kind of, again, zoom in a little bit closer. Here's the patch of land that I'm looking to construct a building, but I've got that 7-meter penetration for this particular surface. Again, this is a horizontal surface. So really what it means to me is I just need to aim for a height that's going to be under this OIS elevation. If I do that, then chances are, if I go through that submission process with the local authorities or the national authority, that should get approved for the most part. And so that's really one of the ways that we can actually work with this type of application. It's really a way for land developers or those that are building new construction projects to kind of interact with the system. So that actually can take some of the load off of the national authority that's actually having to conduct these evaluations, because they know they're going to be getting, for the most part, evaluations that are kind of meeting the criteria that they need. So I probably didn't want to dismiss that. The other thing that I want to highlight with this is, because there's going to be cases where you have surfaces that are overlapping one another, we need to be able to identify that most restrictive surface. A good example of that is even with the approach and the conical surface over here. So in the first part of the approach, as it overlaps the conical, the approach is on top of the conical. So let's say I click in that location. Oops, try that again. Here we go. So if I click in this location, you're going to see that it's grabbing the conical surface, which is actually underneath the approach surface. So if I have multiple surfaces, it's going to be looking for the lowest surface, that most restrictive. This is the one that we need to be paying attention to in terms of construction. Now, if I click on the other side where the approach surface passes underneath the conical, it will then identify the approach surface and the maximum height for that surface that I can build. So if you could imagine having not only just 2 surfaces overlapping, but 3, 4, 5, 6, however many surfaces that are overlapping, you need to be able to drill down into that into the lowest surface, and that's exactly what that widget is doing. And maybe it's kind of the final piece to this one is just also being able to create an elevation profile. So I can maybe essentially click on the center line here along the approach, and you can kind of see you've got essentially the approach view as well as the ground elevation as well. Kind of zoom in a little bit. You can see the land that kind of jets out in various locations that aligns with what we see here on that elevation profile view. So it just gives a little bit more context, more information to the user in terms of not only the height of the surface, but also the terrain across these different areas as well. Okay, so kind of jumping back to the scenario, again, I'm somebody that's coming in just doing a self-evaluation across the different surfaces of where I might want to place my building. I went through that evaluation with, I had the set of coordinates along with the height. After doing that, if I realize that I'm under those surfaces, I stand a pretty good chance of getting that project approved. I can actually come in and click that, submit obstacle, which is going to take us to this form. This is a built off of Survey 123, where I can go in and just enter my name, my email address, essentially go through and say, okay, what kind of building am I going to build? What's the ground elevation? It's 35 meters. The height couldn't be 65, so maybe I dropped it down to 50 meters. Maybe it's going to be lighted, and then I can use those same coordinates over here. Copy paste, and that takes us to to the island. That's the location where I want to submit this. I've got that visual feedback that, yep, this is the right location. This is my submittal date. I can go ahead and submit that, and that can start to create new workflows for the for the authority as well. And one of those could be through this dashboard here. So I've got all of my obstacle submissions and really how I've evaluated those obstacles as well. So these are the different proposals that have come in and what stage in the process they are. So for example, I'm curious about all of the submitted obstacles. These are ones that, including the one that I just created. So if I jump over to Grenada, for example, I can see that obstacle. I'm going to jump back over to the San Diego area where I've got a lot of different obstacles. We can see those that have been constructed and have been verified, site verification, largely those that are in the evaluation process, meaning they're still being under review, whether it's for the OLS surfaces, CNS surfaces, so we can get that feedback. And then we have other metrics as far as like how long is it taking to actually conduct these evaluations. We have targets that we might want to achieve in terms of that evaluation under 30 days. So anything in green is good. If we start to pass 30 days per evaluation, then we need to reassess, how we're conducting those evaluations, or are there ways to improve the process. So, I submitted that the obstacle. It went through. I can start to look at it within this dashboard. That might create some other processes more on the desktop side. We covered that in a previous webinar. But kind of coming back to the survey to configure that input form, that's what we're going to go through next, and then I'll turn it over to Matt. So in this case, we're using Survey 123. I've got a lot of different forms here that I've authored and created. We were just looking at the obstacle submission form. I'm going to actually go through and create a brand new obstacle submission form. So I'll click this design button. Right now, it's just a blank canvas. I can create anything I want. And just to kind of illustrate the ease of creating these survey forms, I'm going to essentially kind of replicate what I created in that obstacle submission. So maybe I've got the submitter's name. And then I want to create another one for their organization or company name. I might want to add an email as we had previously. And then we can add things like numeric values. So that would be the ground elevation, the height of the structure, things like that. Probably one of the more important things is the actual map component. So I just need to find that, that widget here. Here's the map. Once I add the map, I can actually tell it, okay, well, where do I want it to, what is the default location? So I could, choose some place like Grenada as an example. You can choose the UK as another example. We'll just stick with that. The type of inputs that we're going to be accepting, is it a point, line, area? And then if we want to be able to ask for the device's location, so if they're actually accessing this through a smartphone or tablet, we can pull that device's location. Or if it's connected to a GNSS receiver, we can do that as well. Once we go through this configuration of this survey, what we would then do is actually publish it. So I'll go ahead and hit publish. It doesn't take too long to actually publish it, and then I can share this out. And how I share this out could be, it could be just for my organization or for specific groups, or it could be to the public. In some cases, you might need to tie it into your own credentialing system as well. So if you have authorized users to your system, you can tie that in as a way of kind of restricting access and use of this type of application. So typically it takes just a couple of minutes to publish this. And what happens is, as I publish the service, it's also creating some feature services. So for all of those, all of the location information pieces that I create, it's able to take that. Say okay. And then again, I can share this out. So I'm not going to go through that entire process. I think this is kind of as far as I'm going to take this, but this is a very quick, easy way to collect information from external users, from internal users, in the way of their obstacles or in the way of structures that they want to create, and then ultimately manage that submission process through a dashboard like this. And then you can use some of the desktop components to do that evaluation in terms of the height penetration and so forth. So that's so that kind of wraps up my piece. I'm going to turn it over to Matt now at this point, just as a quick, I guess, setting up Matt here. He's going to take us through this view shed and line of sight. Again, just the capabilities of if there's a construction project at the airport, how that project may or may not impact the line of sight capabilities of other elements at the airport. So with that, Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jonathan. So if you're on the line, you know that as Civil Aviation Authority, you have a couple of mandates. Most important, it's need to maintain the air safety for your nation. So part of that job involves maintaining and expanding the facility, but that can't come at the expense of that air safety. So the air traffic control tower must always maintain visibility over taxiways and runways. With limited space, though, these two requirements come into conflict. So what if you had the means to explore different options and configurations? Or what if you could set up a digital twin of your facility and a contractor can explore the environment while building out their proposals? Well, with ArcGIS Earth and ArcGIS system, you can create a digital twin of your facility and then interactively analyze that space to ensure you're meeting your mandate. So let me show you what I mean by going through this ArcGIS Earth demonstration. We're overlooking Maurice J. Bishop International Airport on that Caribbean nation of Grenada that we've been talking about. We've enhanced our view of the airport with some recent high-res imagery and derived buildings from LiDAR point clouds that have been supplied by the government of Grenada. These 3D features will make our analysis more accurate, and Grenada has been given some grant money to expand and improve their facility. However, as you can see, being on a peninsula and surrounded by steep hills, Grenada doesn't have a whole lot of space to expand their airport. But we should be able to find a new spot for a good spot for our new hangar, as Jonathan alluded to. So let's take a look at some of this stuff here. So I'm going to switch over to the tower view. So while the LiDAR does a great job of picking out most of the buildings, in this case, I removed the tower to show you this demonstration. So with the nice new high-res imagery, I can actually collect this tower in real time. And so ArcGIS Earth isn't just a 3D viewer, it's also a 3D editor. So I can actually collect the tower. For these little parameters, I'll set it at an absolute height of 41 meters. I'm going to extend that to the ground. We want to see through that a little bit for visualization purposes. And then just a few clicks, I can actually collect this tower and we can have it 3D rendered. So there's our brand new tower collection in 3D. But what about the hangar? So we can go to our new hangar facility. Here, I think looks like a good spot. There's already aircraft storage here. So let's build that new hangar. And we'll set that one at a height, say, of 30 meters. Send to the ground. Let's change this color. So it sticks out a little bit more. And we'll put our new hangar facility in. All right, so in a few clicks, we have the tower put in there, and we have a proposal for a new hangar. As we mentioned before, we want to see how that impacts the visual ability of the tower to do its job. So inside ArcGIS Earth, not only is it a 3D viewer and a 3D editor, but we also have interactive analysis tools. So I can create a view shed so I can understand exactly what the tower can see with this new hangar in place. So you can see that my observer standpoint is on top of the tower. And as I move the heading around, I can see that the tower cannot see through this building. Most of my runway is blocked off. I don't have that ability to see the taxiways and runways. One thing I want to show you also is that while we can actually pick up the tail of the aircraft here. It might be okay that we're at 30 meters, but this is concerning. We can't see through all that stuff. So what if we just adjusted the height of the hangar a little bit and adjust it down? So maybe we go down to say 20 meters. And we can do our interactive analysis again. So as we rotate through, 20 meters, we can get a whole picture of the aircraft. We lose a little bit of the runway, or a little bit of taxiway here, but the main portions are covered, and we can maintain visibility over the facility. But one thing I do want to check though is I want to maintain some line of sight. I want to understand what it looks like with this hangar in place as my aircraft moves throughout the facility. Let's do an interactive line of sight analysis. We can actually have that be an animation, so we can know as the aircraft moves, what does it look like? What's our line of sight? I'm gonna move that over and give us some more real estate here. So as I'm interactively placing this line of sight, I can get an idea of what we can see through the aircraft. So again, the cyan is visible and the magenta is not visible. All right, so let's place a line right about there. Line. Yeah, should be good there. Okay, we're on top of the tower there. Let's do another line, say from the top of the terminal, and we'll add another line of sight from the top of this maintenance hangar. So we kind of see that all the 3D objects that we have in here are being read by ArcGIS Earth. So we can see, we obviously can't see through that aircraft. We can see here, and we can see through the tower. So let's set this animation and start going here. So back up, and we can see as the aircraft taxis and hits the runway, we get a full line of sight on top of that aircraft. So as we go through, we know that we're not losing any line of sight because of this hangar. That looks good. We're going to start reading in some of the terrain here, so we'll lose some line of sight because of this hill, but we do have eyes on the aircraft the entire time. Let's speed up this animation here. Really get this aircraft moving. Taxis, the takeoff routine. We have eyes on it the entire time. So looks like 20 meters is going to work out for that hangar. And our aircraft begins to take off, and it looks like we can maintain that line of sight all the way through. So through that analysis there, we were able to, it appears that the hangar of 20 meters is going to work out. We were able to find a pretty decent location for it. And while we just explored one option with these lightweight tools inside ArcGIS Earth, we can actually explore unlimited options, all in 3D. Then we can also share this digital twin and create an environment where contractors can test their building proposals before submitting, which will save us time in the review process. We don't have to automatically reject some stuff. And it will save them time in the proposal process because they know what they're proposing is actually going to work. And with that, I'm going to pass it back over to Jonathan.
Great. Thanks, Matt. That was fantastic to see. So let's move into really kind of the wrap up, the summary. I've got some resources for everyone. Really what we want to be able to do is engage our community, engage our stakeholders. And so the system of engagement helps us to connect with that community really in a more meaningful way. And that's really what we want to do, is illustrate in some of these different applications. It's configurable. You can take that to a customizable state as well if you need to really extend beyond some of the capabilities that we have. So you have access to the APIs, the SDKs that are a part of ArcGIS. This is really what WebGIS is. It is, WebGIS at scale. It's collaboration at scale, as we mentioned, the whole configuration all the way through customization. And then being able to deploy these apps quickly really means that you're going to be able to gain business value more immediately as well. And then just as some resources to leave you with, and I believe the links are being dropped into the chat, so you have access to those. I would recommend just clicking on those links to open them up, because once the webinar closes, you'll lose access to those, even though we will be providing those links out as part of a follow-up message. To start with, we've got our user conference, the Esri user conference, that is coming up July 12th to the 15th. Registration is complimentary for everyone. You just need to have an Esri account with a unique email address. And with that said, this is going to give you access to the plenary sessions. To get access to all of the content, including the technical workshops, the special interest groups, you'll need to be a customer that is current on Main. So that's going to really open up the entire user conference experience for you. In addition to the user conference, we actually put together a user conference guide. So just kind of really looking at all the different technical workshops that are relevant to the aviation industry and kind of consolidating that into this user conference guide. This is being updated fairly regularly, so I would check back often for any kind of updates into that user conference guide. We also have a couple more webinars that we're going to conduct this year in the second half of the year as part of our National Aviation Webinar Series. Those are going to be focused largely on the charting side, aviation symbology, how to scale that up to do large production environment, large volume production as well. So really looking at the automation side of chart production. And then I think the last two pieces here, we've actually just opened up a training course, Streamline Airport Operations with ArcGIS Aviation. This was opened up earlier this week, yesterday, actually on Friday, last Friday. So there's actually a course offering if you're interested in understanding more about the airport's extension. It will take you through different scenarios. It'll take, really walk you through how to use the extension, how to set up your database, how to set up the environment for obstacle analysis as an example. So we're doing this as a virtual training class, given the current environment with the pandemic. We hope to be able to do this we will be able to do this in the future on site as required or as needed. But in the meantime, the virtual class will be it'll span across 4 days in 4-hour increments. So, each day will cover 4 hours. It will be largely targeting kind of the European community in their afternoon. So what that means, though, if you're in North and South America, you'll be able to register and attend. It'll be in the morning hours for you, afternoon hours for the European community, even into parts of Africa as well. So strongly encourage, if you have an interest, strongly encouraging to register for that. Spots are limited. I think we've got 15 spots that are available for that course, so I expect that to fill up. And then finally, something new that we released earlier this year is a Learn lesson on learn.arcgis.com. If you're not familiar with learn.arcgis.com, highly recommend taking a look at this. This offers a lot of Learn lessons across our different products, across different workflows in bite-sized pieces. So anywhere from 15 minutes to 30 to 45 minutes, you can get a lot of information and go through different scenarios and interact with our products. So this is a really good resource for our users to get access to. And so with that, I think we're going to move into the question and answer period now. I don't know if we've received any questions. I think we've got some time for some questions that we can open it up now. If you do have questions, just go ahead and insert those into the chat. And then with that, Kiyoshi, I'll kind of turn it over to you to kind of walk us through any questions that we may have.
Sure. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, great. Yeah, so the question pod is light at the moment. So if you do have questions on anything you saw, please feel free to put those into the chat pod. Really, one question so far. There have been a few questions more logistically. It sounds like there was maybe some audio challenges for folks early on. I think largely related to GoToMeeting. You've been loud and clear for me the whole time, Jonathan. So
Okay.
for those that have been able to get that situation fixed and are kind of just now tuning in, just be aware that we are recording the session, and that recording will be available so you can kind of go back and catch any of that audio you may have missed. The one question, kind of main question that came in to the chat is regarding the obstacle evaluator. It was sort of a straightforward question on capabilities there. Really just asking if we're limited to using meters or if we can work in feet. And I can take a stab at that, Jonathan, if you'd like.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so as my understanding, I worked with our developer who put together the custom widget that Jonathan was demonstrating. Given that is a kind of a custom implementation of that widget, you should be able to access, or to use meters or feet, whatever is sort of appropriate for your scenario. I think as we work to kind of create a template of that widget and web app, I think that would be something we would definitely, I guess maybe the point is keep in mind that what we were sort of showing is sort of an early prototype of that widget, and we want to make sure that as we build a template app or widget, that we would want to be able to allow for various units that are required. And anything to add there, maybe Amit or Jonathan?
No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, you can use any units that you need. I saw something come through as far as nautical miles as well. So whatever is going to suit your needs, you can leverage those units. So that's not going to be an issue.
Great.
Yeah, also the latitude longitude format can also be changed to use from decimal degrees to degree minutes seconds. So that can be customized as well.
Right. Yeah, thanks for that. I mean, that's a good point as well. That was something we went through as we were kind of putting together the prototype, was picking a coordinate system for the input coordinates. Ideally, that'd be flexible as well. So that's a good point. Let's see. So there's a question here. Oh, go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a couple of questions in terms of making the presentation recording available. I think Kiyoshi did mention that the recording will be made available. Those that have registered for the webinar will receive an email informing them that when the recording is available, they'll get access to that. So that should kind of answer off a couple of the questions that I'm seeing through the chat here.
Yeah. Another question I think is about Matt's presentation. He's asking if it's applicable via web scene viewer instead of ArcGIS Earth. So I guess maybe the question, Matt, is do you know if any of the kind of line of sight tools are available via web scenes, or is it strictly ArcGIS Earth?
Yeah, that's a great question and a great observation. The line of sight tools and the viewshed tools, the interactive analysis tools that I showed, are not available in a web scene, which is why I decided to go with ArcGIS Earth in general. It gives you those interactive analysis tools in a lightweight, application.
Okay. They are available in Pro though, right? In the kind of
absolutely. Yeah, they're even more robust in ArcGIS Pro.
Okay, great. Let's see. Well, sorry, I need to expand my column if I can. Okay, let's see. What kind of license? Oh, go ahead, Jonathan. Sorry.
No, I was maybe jumping ahead. There was a question came in. It looked like around how to create some of the surfaces for the nav aids, for the obstacle surfaces as well. We didn't go through that. We covered that in the previous webinar. I think maybe what we can do is if somebody can on the team can find that link and drop it into the chat window, we can share that out. but largely those surfaces were created through our desktop application, ArcGIS Pro. It is all standards driven, so using the criteria from Annex 4, Annex 14, Annex 15, I think, as well, and some of the FAA criteria. So for Part 77, 18B, we cover all of that. And if there's changes to those standards, we incorporate those changes into the application as well. So it is a part of an extension to ArcGIS Pro called ArcGIS Aviation Airports that allows you to create that very quickly. So hopefully that answers a couple of the questions I saw around that.
Yeah. Another question I see here is about, is there going to be a tool to build the surfaces for elements like Navids or Heliports? And I may let Amit handle that one. I think the answer is yes. Some of those tools may exist, and I know there's some additional tools that we're working on as well.
Yeah, that's correct. We do have the capability to create those CNS surfaces around Navids. And for the heliports, we added capabilities based on the international and the US standards in the coming release, which is the 2.8 release that's out. So that can be created today. Okay,
and so just to be clear, Amit, that's in ArcGIS Pro 2.8, which came out a week or two ago.
Yeah, I think it came out, yeah, almost a month ago, I think.
Oh, okay, a little bit longer. Yeah. Oh, I think something else. Okay, great. Yeah, so let's see, the environment for the airspace surface creation. So I'm assuming we're talking about the OIS surfaces, the obstacle limitation surfaces. Those can be created in both ArcMap and ArcPro. I think the surfaces that we used in the demonstration were created with our tools in ArcPro, ArcGIS Pro at the moment. So far, we don't have the capabilities to create the surfaces via the web, and I'm not sure, Amit, if that's something we've looked at or if that's something we have planned.
Yeah, that is a capability we are looking to incorporate in future releases, but not anytime soon right now.
Okay. Let's see. There was another question here about Nodems. Maybe Jonathan, you can tackle this one. Are we able to create Nodems through the app, or for the obstacle info are we able to pass this information onto an external system? I think you sort of touched on this.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I like that question quite a bit because we've done some work around Nodems in recent months, and we've got some prototypes out. I think largely there's a couple of ways to address Nodems. So what you're talking about is probably more, the issuing creation of Nodems. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a kind of standardized format to create these Nodems and, standardized text around that. So we could create that. It is, the capabilities are all there. It just depends on what kind of system, what kind of Nodem system you need to tie into. And then how do you want to maybe perhaps visualize that in some kind of mapping environment, make that available to a broader community. Because ultimately, that's what I would like to see more around Nodems is how we're able to visualize that, get away from kind of the text-based distribution of Nodems and to a more map-centric environment so we can actually visualize these things. You can still have the associated text with it, but I want to be able to see, okay, well, where are the Nodems and how do they impact, my flight planning, for example. So happy to go into that topic offline with the individual that posed the question, but that's a really good question. We've done some work around Nodems, and perhaps this is a webinar topic that we could address, perhaps later this year even.
Great. Yeah, so there's a couple more questions in here. I maybe tackle one more and just kind of point out that those that we weren't able to get to, we'll try to address in a written Q&A summary after the fact. So the question here is regarding I think the elevation that was used. So for the, let's see, altimeter base, would that be the world DEM 24 meters with a vertical accuracy of 3 meters. I think that the elevation models that we're using in our in the web app that we demonstrated is Esri's World Terrain model, and I'm not sure of the specifications behind.
Maybe the short answer to that is if you have your own terrain that you want to use,
Right.
you can use that. That's not going to be an issue. Like Kiyoshi mentioned, we were just using our world elevation terrain service that we have that we were pulling from. But of course, there certainly is higher resolution terrain that's out there that you could certainly drop as part of that web scene and start to draw from that. I hope I hope we're answering the question correctly.
That's a good way of summing it. I think I was trying to build to that, but losing my way a little bit. I think essentially the app is built around a web scene. The terrain that you use in that web scene can be, either the stuff that Esri has already, or if you have your own elevation model, you could use that as well. So
yeah.
With that, I think maybe I'll turn it back over to you, Jonathan. There were a few questions in here about contact information and things like that. So maybe if you want to share some of the aliases and things, that would cover some of those as well as we wrap up.
Okay, well, how about we just move to this slide here. So yeah, as we close out, just a reminder, the webinar, I know this came up in some of the questions, the webinar has been recorded. And we will be following up with an email and a link to that recording. So, for those that have registered, you'll get that email, you'll get a link to the recording. So also after the webinar, we do ask that there's going to be a short survey, a couple of quick questions. We ask that you answer those survey questions. This is important feedback for us and helps us understand maybe perhaps, where do we need to take some of the next webinars as well. So with that, on behalf of the Esri team here, I want to say thank you to everybody that's joined us, and we wish you a pleasant rest of the day. Thank you.